So this is how my dad almost died in the hospital where I worked when I was a resident. It was 2021. We had gotten over the hump of the first round of the pandemic. It was wintertime, January, it was right after Christmas. Cases were picking up again. I ended up getting COVID right before Christmas. I couldn't even go home to be with my family for Christmas. I literally found out on Christmas Eve and I was devastated. But I spent a week in isolation um, because it was getting so, we were having so many cases. Somebody else ended up coming to Christmas with COVID, even though it was probably a pretty small group, I would hope, now that I'm thinking about this. Um, and so everybody ended up getting COVID. And I remember it was New Year's Eve. We didn't go anywhere because everybody was still kind of sick. We just stayed home. We like ordered Chinese food, and we were just home as a family for New Year's. Flash forward like a week and a half, and my dad's like, we were always worried about him with COVID because he was overweight and likely insulin resistant, high cholesterol, like all the metabolic syndrome things that we worry about that were like made people high risk for COVID. And we had him on steroids. We were doing the thing with the prednisone, whatever we needed, like aspirin, vitamins, right? Whatever we thought would help him to help him during that time. And he just was not really getting better. And I remember being in my apartment. It was like a Saturday. This was in Connecticut. My mom called. She's like, he's not looking good. His oxygen is like 85. It's not getting any better. He doesn't feel good. He's starting to look like kind of gray. I think we need to bring him to the hospital. Now you can imagine, I am now a second-year resident, but I was an intern when the pandemic happened. I've seen a lot of people die at this point, and I just felt my heart like drop into my stomach, and I just felt like I wanted to throw up. But I was like, okay, put him in the car, bring him up here, and I'll meet you at the hospital. So I met my mom at the hospital, brought him into the emergency room. We brought him into triage. I told him, like, this is my dad. He's having trouble breathing. Um, oh God, I can like cry just thinking about this. It was so bad. And we brought him in. It- I love, I can't even tell you how much like love I have for all the doctors I work with who worked in the emergency room, all the attending doctors who I worked with in my residency, and just so much love and gratitude for these people. So he came in. We're like, okay, do a CT chest, make sure he doesn't see what's going on with his lungs, make sure he doesn't have a blood clot, because that was happening a lot with COVID. No blood clot, lungs look COVID-y. Let's admit him, let's put him on remdesivir. What we were doing at the time, remdesivir, steroids, supplemental oxygen, proning, right, putting people on their belly. We brought him, he was admitted to the hospital. He was up on one of the like tele floors, and they had him on like a nasal cannula. He didn't look great, but he looked okay. Like he looked okay. And I have a picture of him like eating that day with the nasal cannula in at the hospital. And it just the whole thought, him being in a room in the hospital where I watch people die, I like couldn't I could not relax. I felt like no matter what I did, nothing, I couldn't watch TV, I couldn't read, nothing would help me relax. And that night he did like okay. I started praying rosaries. Now, I grew up Catholic. I don't go to church every Sunday. I went to Catholic school. I know all the things. I probably prayed the rosary more than most people in their life. Um, but the only thing that would calm me down during that time was praying the rosary. So I would just pray over and over and over and over and over. And I was praying to the Blessed Mother, and I'm praying obviously to God, and I'm calling on every relative you can imagine that's passed away, every saint I can think of off the top of my head. I am like praying like crazy. Why I was praying like crazy is because after that first day, all of a sudden his oxygen requirements got much, much worse. And he went from like just having this little nasal cannula to all of a sudden he's on like high flow and he's getting like 80 liters of oxygen like every minute. And his oxygen is still like so. And they're talking about putting him on like BiPAP. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is not looking good. Like, this is really not looking good. He's getting worse instead of getting better after we put him on this medications. And there was nothing I could do. Like, there was nothing I could do except stay there and be there with him because they were like, don't, you don't have to. I was on an elective. They're like, you don't have to come in. But I would just sit there with him. And because I worked there, I could sit there with him. So I was praying like crazy. I remember going home and just sitting in my apartment crying and crying and praying and crying. And I just felt so incredibly like helpless. Like there was no, I'm a doctor. My dad is so sick and there's nothing I can do. I was like, I remember praying. I'm praying to my grandmother, who's my dad's mom that had passed away. I'm like, please, Nonna, like, please be with him, like, take care of him, watch over him. I'm praying to his best friend that passed away. I'm like, Uncle Paulie, please, like, what, please, anybody that will listen. I sat in front of the church at like 10 o'clock at night with my rosary, and I was like, please. And then, like, maybe a day or a few days later, one of the floor teams, like my resident teams, was taking care of him, and this attending who is so smart. Like, she was so smart. She was reading the literature. She was on top of everything. She was such a good educator. She kept us all on our toes. And she said, I know I know they did a CAT scan when he first came, but his oxygen requirements are getting higher. And I read one of the studies that the remdesivir, they're seeing that maybe the remdesivir is causing blood clots in some people, and it's possible that he may have a blood clot. Now, mind you, he had a CT chest, right, with contrast, a CTA, 2 days before. So this is like a big test requiring contrast, less like 48 hours. So this was like a big call to make. And you obviously have to justify it, why you're doing it and all the different things. She spoke to vascular. They said, okay, I think it's a good job. I remember they did the scan and I think I was working. I think at that point I had been back on a floor team and I got the call from one of the cardiologists. I remember who it was. And he was like, your dad has a saddle PE. He's like, we need to start anticoagulation immediately. And I felt like my body was like numb. Basically, what that means is he came in 2 days before, did not have a blood clot in his lungs. 2 days later, whether it was the medications, the COVID, whatever it was, had a blood clot that was sitting right in the middle of his two pulmonary arteries, where if at any moment that could have shifted, right, and it would have moved, he could end up going into cardiac arrest if it blocked one of the pulmonary arteries completely or pieces of it dislodged. And because that doctor had read the studies and she just had like a feeling, right, like one of those gut feelings, and they did that test, they put him on anticoagulation. They didn't have to do any procedures. And within a day, like less than a day, his oxygen started to get better. And he started to get better and better and better. And I swear, like, I believe in medicine. I believe in the doctors who took care of him. But I'm telling you that I have never prayed that way in my life. And yes, like some people pray, right? And you don't get an answer. Sometimes that happens. But I truly feel that he was healed because I was praying to everybody that you could imagine, was asking for all types of intercession. I remember K-Love, like the radio station, the Christian radio station. My mom and I called in for them to pray for my dad. Never done that before, but in desperate times call for desperate measures. And that was one of the scariest times of my life. I remember talking with kind of like a mentor that I was part of this integrative medicine group. And she said, you are going through a threshold. She's like, this is a threshold. You get to take care of your father like he took care of you when you were a baby. And it's funny, I have a picture of me and my dad. When I was born premature. I was less than 5 pounds. My mom was obviously recovering from delivery and all those things. And I was in an incubator. for 2 weeks, and my dad and my mom too would come to the hospital, and they would take care of me, and he would feed me with, like, the little bottle, and it was like when she put that in perspective, like, my dad took care of me when I was a newborn, and now I get to take care of him, and during that time when he was in the hospital, and I would, like, get his oxygen, help him, like, walk to the bathroom, I would, get him food or whatever he needed, and, like, I know he wanted to shave one day, and, like, his oxygen we'd, like, hook up the oxygen and, like, walk him to the bathroom, and I'm, like, holding him with one arm and watching the oxygen with the other, and, just being able to be there and, like, take care of him, and it honestly was a privilege, and I'm so grateful that he is alive and thriving, and I think that experience made me a better doctor. I think it made me really be able to understand what people were going through, even though I had the privilege of being able to be there because I worked there and all those things. But it gave me this profound sense of gratitude for the people I worked with and the residents and, resident who's like hugging me in the hallway and like the profound sense of just like I was so grateful, and I'm still so grateful for those moments. And if anybody who like took care of my dad happens to listen to this, just know like thank you. Thank you so much. I send you so much love, so much gratitude, so much like blessings in whatever area of your life. Like I'm just so grateful. And so that is my experience when my dad almost died of COVID in the hospital where I was a resident. I hope this story is valuable to you. I hope you found it interesting and it kind of added to your soul in some way and helped you be a better doctor or be a better person, whatever you're trying to achieve in this life. Well, if you liked it or if you're interested and you want to see more, please like and subscribe. Thank you for listening.